Welcome to the Commander Crew, a Magic the Gathering Commander YouTube channel where we ask the question, who's your commander?
We want to thank you for watching our videos. You can help support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and hitting the bell notification icon.
You can also go to thecommandercrew.com to check out our t-shirts, masks, pet hoodies, and other Commander Crew goodies.
If you want to buy any of the cards seen in this video, be sure to click our TCG Player affiliate link in the show notes below.
Lastly, you can help us out by heading to our official Patreon page and becoming a direct supporter of the channel. Now let's
get to the video.
What's up, everyone? It's your boy Eddie from the Commander Crew, and today we're going to do a quick take on Breena the Demagogue. Breena the Demagogue costs 1 a white and a black for a 1/3 legendary bird warlock with flying, and whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature that you control. So at first glance, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't overly excited about this commander, but then I started reading it a couple more times over and started making some very close connections to Edric and Tymna. And both of those are very powerful commanders. Both of those see a lot of play, even some EDH play. Not to say that I think Breena is going to be anywhere close to that type of power level, but it does have a similar political aspect to it, similar to Edric. And I like it. I think this commander is really growing on me more and more and more, especially when I'm looking at other cards that I think are going to flow really well with it. So let's go through some of those cards and see what you guys think. So first off, we want to be able to get in some damage. And the best way to do this is by playing some very evasive cards. So we're going to be putting +1/+1 counters on a lot of our creatures. So something like Abzan Falconer is really cool because it's going to give any creatures that you have that have a +1/+1 counter on them flying. Then we also have cards like Akroma's Will, where this is going to outright just give your creatures flying, and it also has some built-in protection if you wanted to use the other mode, or if you have your commander on the battlefield so that you can use both modes. We also have Whisper Silk Cloak, which is going to make an equipped creature unblockable. We can play creature spells who already have that built-in unblockable, such as Tormented Soul or Changeling Outcast. And then we can also play things that have fear, which in our format, fear typically ends up being very similar to unblockable. Fear basically makes it so that it can only be blocked by artifact creatures and black creatures. And then even better, you can play cards that have shadow, which can only be blocked by other creatures that have shadow. So these cards are really, really good. Then lastly, we also have a card, Eldrazi Monument. This is one of my all-time favorite cards. I play it in a lot of my Go Wide decks, just because that flying is really amazing. Being able to give all of your creatures flying and that evasiveness there is just incredible. A lot of people don't play enough flyers in their decks, so take advantage of that. Outside of evasiveness, we are putting a lot of counters on things by using Breena's ability, so let's take advantage of those counters. Let's maybe add some more. So first off, we have Victory's Envoy, where at the beginning of your upkeep, you can put a 1/1 counter on each other creature that you control. We have Ajani Goldmane, and there are a bunch of Ajani cards that are very similar to this, but you can use his second ability that allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on each of the creatures that you control. We have Cathar's Crusade, one of the most powerful +1/+1 counter cards in white. We have Felidar Retreat, one of my new favorite cards, where it has a landfall ability where you can not only put +1/+1 counters on things, but if you can get more than one landfall trigger in a turn, you can go back and forth between the +1/+1 counter ability and also creating 2/2 Cat Beast creature tokens. We also have Michaeus the Lunar, which not only can you put a bunch of counters on Michaeus, but the second ability allows you to tap him to be able to remove a counter and put a 1/1 counter on each other creature that you control. Then we have Unbreakable Formation, which not only is a built-in protection card, giving all of your creatures indestructible, but if you cast it during your main phase, you can give all of your creatures a +1/+1 counter as well. Then we have Collective Effort. I love cards like this where you get more than one option. So it does have that built-in ability of being able to put a 1/1 counter on each creature that target player controls. But in addition to that, you can destroy a creature that has power 4 or greater, or you can destroy an enchantment. Next up, Unbreakable Symbol. This is a card you don't see played very often in Commander, but it is a very good card when you're playing around with +1/+1 counters, because you can use your life as a resource. One of the biggest benefits of playing black, right? So you pay 3 life and you can put a 1/1 counter on target creature. You can do that at instant speed. You can just pump the crap out of one of your creatures that's swinging in, maybe your commander, and deal enough damage to take out an opponent. Then we have Feast on the Fallen, which is a 3-mana enchantment that says at the beginning of each upkeep, as long as an opponent lost life last turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature that you control. So now that's giving you extra counters after you've incentivized your opponents to attack each other. And then lastly, we have one of my favorite cards. We have Drana, Liberator of Malacare. This card I play in my Edgar Markov deck because it's really, really good. Whenever it attacks and deals combat damage to a player, you're going to put a 1/1 counter on each other attacking creature that you control. It also has flying, which gives you some of that added evasiveness, and because of the first strike, it's going to deal damage before your other creatures, and you're going to be able to put those counters on the creatures on your other creatures that don't have first strike before they deal the damage. It's really, really good. So adding these counters, absolutely amazing, right? There are some other ways to add counters as well and take advantage of the counters that we've already added. One of the ways is by using an ability called Proliferate. So we can use a card like Sword of Truth and Justice, which not only when you deal damage to a player can you put a 1/1 counter on a creature that you control, but you can also proliferate. And Proliferate reads, choose any number of permanents or players, then give each another counter of each kind that they already have. We're putting +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. And using a card like this, where not only does it have some built-in evasiveness because it has protection from white and blue, so we're likely to get in some damage. Once we deal that damage, we're going to be able to put a +1/+1 counter on at least one of our creatures, and then pump up any of our other creatures that already have +1/+1 counters on it. Proliferate is absolutely amazing with this. Then we have Grateful Apparition. Grateful Apparition not only has flying, so it's evasive, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, you can proliferate. There's that keyword again. We have Karn's Bastion, which is a land, so there's absolutely no reason not to run that in this deck. A 5-mana activation to add a 1/1 counter to each of your creatures on your battlefield, that's pretty good, especially because it's on a land. There's no reason not to run it. And then lastly, we have Yawgmoth, Thrawn Physician, which not only has protection from humans, so you can swing in as long as your opponents just have humans there and guarantee yourself that you're going to be able to deal some damage, so a little bit of evasiveness there. But also, you can sack creatures to put -1/-1 counters on another creature. And then lastly, you can discard cards to proliferate. This is crazy, right? Because we're playing around with proliferate effects, so we're going to be able to kill off some of our opponent's creatures. We're going to be able to draw some cards in the process, and then on top of that, we're going to be able to pump up our creatures using that proliferate ability as well. Proliferate is just amazing anytime you're playing around with counters, so always pay attention to those types of effects when you're doing that. And then lastly, we have all these +1/+1 counters on creatures, right? So let's take advantage of that. And we can do that by playing some cards that allow us to remove counters for benefit. So first off, we have Mindless Automaton. Mindless Automaton lets us not only discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on him, but we can remove 2 +1/+1 counters and draw a card. Then we have Triskelion, which lets us remove counters to be able to put artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield that are also going to have an ability that allows us to sacrifice them to deal damage to any target, including players, right? So this is a way of us getting some damage in for our counters directly to our opponents. Then we have Twilight Drover, which is also going to allow us to remove counters to create flying tokens. And lastly, Custody Soulbinders, which again allows us to remove counters to create flying creature tokens. Next up, we have Triskelion, which allows us to remove counters to deal 1 damage to any target. And then Walking Ballista, which allows us to do the same. And then we have Workhorse, which is a workhorse in this deck, right? We can remove counters to ramp. Then we have Shinewind, which allows us to remove counters to destroy enchantments. We have Retribution of the Ancients, and actually, Karlov, which allows us to remove counters to get rid of creatures, right? So we can deal with some of those threats that are sitting on our opponent's side of the table. Do I think this commander is the best that we've seen so far? No, I'm very partial to the Simic one that I talked about previously. But I do still think this is really cool. I think being able to play around with counters in Orzhov can be extremely fun. Being able to take advantage of those counters and being able to incentivize your opponents to attack each other is just amazing, right? It's a nice, fun, political way to win at Magic. So those are my views on this particular commander. Those are the cards that I think will work really well with it. If you guys have any other ideas, any other strategies that you would build around with Breena, let us know down in the comments. And other than that, until next time, take care.